China's economic growth is set to fall behind the rest of Asia for the first time since 1990, according to the World Bank.
Hidden debts, unpaid wages, and a financial crisis unlike any other. Is the Chinese government really out of money? In today's shocking expose video, we uncover the truth behind peculiar urban investment bonds and the wave of unpaid wages sweeping the nation. You won't believe what we've uncovered, so stay tuned to find out how this could change everything. China could be in a lot of trouble if problems with unpaid wages and jobs are not fixed right away. If it is not solved, it could be a bad one for the Communist Party, which is in power. The Communist Party is trying hard to keep the country stable in the face of high youth unemployment, a slowing economy, and an explosion of COVID across the country, according to the Geneva Daily. Millions of Chinese workers who helped the government enforce strict lockdown measures are not happy about the sudden end of the zero-COVID policy. Private companies that hired them fired them without giving them any compensation, and they haven't been paid their monthly wages since November. This has led them to protest in several cities across the country, according to the Geneva Daily. According to the New York Times, hundreds of angry pandemic control workers clashed with police in the city of Chongqing in the southwest of China. They were upset about not getting paid by the company that hired them to enforce the government's zero-COVID measures. In the same Chinese city, police detectives and hundreds of workers at a company that make test kits for COVID got into a fight over pay. It was a horrible sight. Since they hadn't been paid for months, these workers broke machines and threw things at police officers. As the high cost of the world's strictest virus controls drains the budgets of many local governments, it is feared that more and more Chinese cities will see protests and violence over salaries and jobs in the coming days. They can't pay what they owe to the companies that sent people and equipment to help with the zero-COVID policy. Meanwhile, China's economy grew by only 3% in 2022, which was the worst performance in almost 50 years. This was because of widespread lockdowns, a downturn in the property market that had never happened before, and a very hot weather. China's National Bureau of Statistics said in a report that the country's GDP grew by 2.9% in the fourth quarter. In December, industrial production slowed to 1.3%, and retail sales for all of 2022 fell by 0.2%. Also, exports of goods fell 9.9% because there was less demand for Chinese goods around the world, logistics networks were disrupted by COVID lockdowns, and there were not enough workers to do the work. Big companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, Samsung and Volvo have decided to move their operations outside of China. This is partly because of a possible conflict over Taiwan, and partly because the country's economy is slowing down and people don't buy as much. This has put a bad spell on the health of China's economy as a whole. Analysts at Capital Economics, a financial organization based in London, think that China's economy will shrink by 0.8% in the first quarter of 2023. That means the Chinese job market, where about 20 million people aged 16 to 24 are unemployed in cities and towns, will continue to be tough. How much money the country has spent so far to combat the pandemic is unclear. Guangdong, on the other hand, revealed that it had spent $22 billion on eliminating COVID over a 3-year period, beginning in 2020. Meanwhile, revenue fell sharply during the same time period. Rolling lockdowns significantly reduced household income, causing many to cut back on spending, resulting in less tax revenue for local governments. Massive tax breaks to assist businesses during the pandemic also reduced government revenue. The housing market slump is complicating matters even more. Home prices have been falling for 16 months in a row. Land sales have collapsed, accounting for more than 40% of local government revenue. According to operator announcements, a number of cities suspended bus services last year due to budget constraints, including Leyang in Hunan province and Yangjiang in Guangdong. Separately, according to state media reports, Hegang, a city in Heilongjiang province, made history in early 2022 by becoming the first to be forced to undergo a fiscal restructuring due to severe debt distress. As a result, it must reduce infrastructure spending, reduce government subsidies to industries, stop hiring new employees and sell assets according to state council rules. Jobs in the public sector, which are considered the most secure in the country, were also affected elsewhere. According to the Chinese news website Caixin, several wealthy eastern provinces, including Guangdong, Zhejiang and Jiangsu, cut pay by up to 30% in June. China's local government debt had been rising dramatically for a decade prior to the pandemic owing largely to a state-led investment boom following the 2008 global financial crisis. However, in the last 3 years, the situation has rapidly deteriorated. According to data released by the Ministry of Finance on Sunday, local government debt increased by 15% last year to 35 trillion yuan. According to state media, interest payments on local government bonds have surpassed 1 trillion yuan for the first time in history. Debt backed by local governments but not reflected on their balance sheets could be much larger. According to a recent estimate by Mars Macro, an economic research firm based in Hunan, the hidden debt issued by local government financial vehicles, entities created to circumvent borrowing restrictions and used to channel funding for infrastructure spending, could total 65 trillion yuan by the middle of 2022. This is more than 20% higher than Goldman Sachs' 2021 estimate of 53 trillion yuan. This would amount to more than half of China's GDP. According to analysts, China's government debt now equals 102% of its GDP. That debt ratio is still lower than America's, which is currently around 122% based on its national debt and GDP in 2022, but China's has more than doubled from 47% in 2016. China's real estate market crash is a good example of how people are becoming less willing to take risks. China's rapid credit growth over the past 10 years has helped real estate more than any other asset. Rapid credit growth fed a self-reinforcing cycle of rising property prices, more construction work, rising land prices and revenues for local governments, stronger economic growth and then more credit growth to the sector, and even higher property prices and land prices. The property was the asset bubble that didn't burst for 20 years because people thought that local governments were dependent on the market and rising land prices and couldn't let it fall. But in the end, changes in how easy it was to get credit were what caused the rise and fall of the Chinese real estate market. The Chinese government tried to stop the rise of the property market during the time of rapid credit growth, but they could not. They won't be able to stop the fall of the property market as long as the credit market is tight. The only thing that has surprised people is that the credit-dependent sector grew quickly from 2017 to 2020, even though the shadow banking system shrank. Property developers bought themselves a few more years of growth starting in 2017 by replacing informal credit from the shadow banking system with credit directly from home buyers in the form of pre-construction housing sales. Developers are facing a big drop in property sales, and neither fiscal policy nor credit policy can make up for the whole drop. Total annual sales of residential housing by developers hit a high of 18 trillion yuan in June 2021, but have since dropped to 13.2 trillion yuan, a loss of 4.8 trillion yuan or about 4.5% of GDP. The credit crunch is getting worse and more people are threatening to stop paying their mortgages. This makes even fewer people want to buy homes before they are finished being built. This year, sales of finished homes are the same, but sales of homes that are still being built are going down. The stress from the property sector is most visible in local government finances. According to Ministry of Finance data, the decline in land sales to struggling developers has impacted localities with sales down 48% by area and 32% in terms of revenue so far this year. Local government financing vehicles were among the primary borrowers from the shadow banking system, and many municipalities have already felt the effects of the deleveraging campaign and its impact on informal lending. The pain has also been distributed unevenly across Chinese provinces, with credit contractions affecting the northeastern and western provinces the most. Thank you for joining us on this eye-opening journey. If you found this information valuable, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible content.